we're actually not 100% sure on getting the jab, and because I'm pregnant.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations.
And we're not sure if it's safe or not.
So one of the important things to recognise is the vaccination has actually been studied in all stages of pregnancy, and it's safe both for mothers and babies, and it doesn't affect you as a mum, and it doesn't actually affect the fetus as it's growing.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
The good news is that we know even from early on in the pregnancy, it's still safe.
I'm breastfeeding my baby exclusively, and not by choice. My baby will not take the bottle. I have done a bit of research online, in particular the research displayed on the Health Organisation New Zealand website, and it's a little unsettling, and it could be a fact that I'm not sure how to read that research.
Often reading health websites does do exactly what you said. It provides more questions in your mind than sometimes the answers. It's easier sometimes just to ask the question like you have today. When you look at babies who are born to mothers that are not vaccinated and breastfeed versus mothers who have been vaccinated and breastfeed, there's no difference in terms of side effects or anything else that you would observe, whether it be being able to latch on, for example, any sleep disturbance, all those other things that can be quite normal when you have a newborn baby. So if you compare those two groups, there's no difference at all.
Vaccine causes you to have an immune response, so your antibodies are stimulated, and those antibodies are passed on in the breast milk to your child. So you are extending some of your immune protection from the vaccine into your baby by breastfeeding.
That small percentage of breastfed babies who came out with adverse effects, is that still a possibility?
So the adverse effects that are reported have to be reported, but there are also the same things that we see in other babies who didn't have mothers who had vaccines.
So the upset or the side effects that are seen equally in unvaccinated mothers as who breastfeed their babies.
Okay, so it's just one of those things that needs to be, okay, yep, no, it's loud and clear. Cool.
So it's the tricky way that we tell you things.
Why should I get it? And if I don't get it, what's the worst that could happen? Obviously, getting COVID is terrible, but are the chances of that high, or are they pretty slim to none?
Kia ora. Okay, so why you should get it? This is a pretty easy question to answer, because COVID-19's here, hohepa. We know it's circulating around here in Auckland, and it's leaked out of Auckland. And the risk is if you get it, you could end up in hospital or you could die. And millions of people have died from it. So number one is to protect you. And number two is even if you don't only get mild symptoms, you might pass it on to a loved one or someone you care about who's more vulnerable, and you'd be passing on potentially a lethal virus to them.
One of the things that's prevented us from going to get vaccinated was because of the reports of adverse effects, and then, some more severe than others, but reports of dizziness, feeling fatigued, headaches and so forth. And me being a Māori woman in my 50s with, other issues, I guess I was a little bit worried about that.
The good thing about the Pfizer vaccine is that actually the side effects tend to be very short-lived, okay? Versus the effect of COVID, if you caught it, you could have the condition called long COVID. And that gives a lot of those symptoms, but they don't necessarily go away. And so I always say to people, think about what it would mean if you had to live with those symptoms that you're worried about all the time, rather than just for 48 hours.
I mean, I guess because there had been, people saying that there was a 90%, or probably even less than that, because that sounds really high to me, for people who were unvaccinated recovering. you know, when they got COVID. Have you guys heard of anything like that?
So this long COVID affects about a third of people. So just because you may survive it doesn't mean that you don't live with symptoms after it. It just means that you got out of hospital.
Any people who don't recover are all our loved ones, and so we're quite concerned about them too. That's part of the reason why we're doing it.
Some people have reported or have found after receiving their vaccinations that they were magnetic for a period of time. Does anyone know why that would be happening after the vaccination?
Looking at Facebook the other day, and I seen a video about spoons sticking to people after having the vaccination, and they were saying that people are being magnetised after their vaccination.
I think it's probably not happening to any, like I've checked this out and I've never seen it. Like the only time I've ever seen it is on YouTube.
I don't know if you remember, there was a trick we used to do when we were kids, and you could sort of make a spoon stick to your nose. So these spoons will actually stick to our skin because of the oils and things on our skin.
There used to be this, in old vaccines they would use things like aluminium, and I think that's kind of where people have got this idea from, that there could be metal inside of it and it could be magnetised, but actually that's not the case for this vaccine.
Okay.
There's nothing magnetic in that Pfizer vaccine. So we've both had it. We're not nothing's sticking to us, is it?
No, I have been described as having a magnetic personality, so I think people might be getting confused. I think if you're going into Facebook, you've got to be careful.
Could this vaccine cause our rangatahi to become sterile or infertile?
The good news is it can't, okay? So the vaccine only acts locally in your body. It doesn't go anywhere near our rangatahi's ovaries or their testicles, and that's why we're recommending it for our young people. It's why I gave it to my own children, and I wouldn't have done that if it was going to affect their fertility. So I'm absolutely confident that our rangatahi's fertility is safe.
I'm an anaphylactic, and I've done a lot of research in that, but I think the worry is that I have an EpiPen, and I've discovered that I'm allergic to a lot of things, and it makes me very anxious to even put another needle in me. Will this affect me in any way?
Okay. Well, you've come to the right place, because I happen to be an allergist, and I understand that you feel anxious about having another needle, but we can keep you safe when we vaccinate you. And having anaphylaxis in the past isn't a reason not to have the vaccine now. But I want to be honest with you too, that there is a risk you can have an allergic reaction to the vaccine, but it's very, very rare. So it's 1 in every 200,000 people who get a vaccine. And so we always do it in a place that's safe and you can be looked after. And nobody who's had a reaction in New Zealand has come to any harm from that reaction, because they're really good at keeping you safe.
My only concern with getting the vaccine is like hearing about the blood clots, which is pretty rare, but what more can I do to try and find out if it is safe? It's pretty clear to me, if I look at what happens if COVID's travelling in people who are not vaccinated, yeah, people with hypertension get into trouble. It's gonna smack you around, I'm just saying. And people who've got, you know, hemorrhaging or blood clot disorders and stuff like that, it's a problem. And so I want you protected. I want you to get vaccinated, protect you. There have been some vaccines that have been associated with blood clots, but those ones are not the Pfizer vaccine that we're using here. And it's really important for you to know that the virus actually causes blood clots and problems with the blood, which is why Rawiri wanted you to get vaccinated to keep you safe from the virus.
Will the vaccine have an effect on our DNA makeup? When
I get injected, it goes in and it's got messenger RNAs, a set of instructions, tells my cells to make the spike protein, and that's what it does. And it doesn't get into my nucleus, it doesn't affect my DNA, so all good. No long-term side effects, sweet as. Yeah, the other thing to say to you is that your body's making messenger RNA all the time,
And so it's got a really good system for clearing it away, and it can do that within hours or days. So after you have the vaccine, that messenger RNA, it's going to be gone out of your body within a couple of days, completely gone.
It took me a long time to have my first vaccination, and I've decided to have it 3 weeks ago. But I was a bit concerned about the quick change in, the gaps in between the first and the second vaccination. Why have they just all of a sudden changed from 6 to 3 weeks?
That's a great
between
question.
the first and second vaccination?
That's a great question. Anthony, off you go.
So those studies had a 3-week gap, partly because they needed to get lots of vaccine done really quickly. And then in places like the United Kingdom, they looked at extending it out. So they looked at 6 weeks, 9 weeks, and even 12 weeks. And in those second lot of studies, they found that if you looked at people's markers of immunity, there was a tendency, if you spread the doses out, that actually maybe it produced a better long-term response. However, we've moved back to 3 weeks again, because what we want to do is give people the option, given the fact that COVID's becoming more prevalent, say here in Tāmaki, that people can get that top protection that we knew from that first study as early as possible, and that there's no difference in terms of things like side effects or anything else.
It's just that, I have suffered a few side effects of headaches and, feeling pretty tired. So I was wondering if that would increase with the second dose, or, do you know the answer to that?
So it is interesting. So the side effects you get on your first shot don't necessarily mean that you get more of the same in the second shot. So I got a sore arm for my first one and nothing else, and then for my second one my arm didn't hurt at all, but I felt sick in the middle of the night. One thing I would say is more people are likely to get something on their second dose. So if you got away scot-free on your first dose, it doesn't necessarily mean that you may not on your second.
Anthony, some people say that side effects are a good sign. What do you say to that?
Yeah, so I would say that side effects are a sign that your immune system is recognising the vaccine. So some people get worried when they sort of get a fever or lumps under their arm, but actually that's just a sign that your immune system's recognised the vaccine and is preparing the immune response.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. We all got our vaccine, myself, my husband and my 2 sons.
Well done.
We were, because us Māori, we're quite resistant when it comes to the government telling us we have to get this done and we have to get that done. We're past history.
Right.
So, and we all got different side effects. One son got nothing, and the others, so it's, all I wanted to know really is that gap in between the first and second dose, but you've answered my question, so yeah.
Cool.
We're ready for it.
Kia ora.
Do you believe there could be a natural rongoa out there to heal those who become infected with COVID or Delta?
Well, that's such a beautiful question too. I'll tell you what I normally say to this, and then I'm going to add something extra. I say there's no traditional rongoa for it because we never had this disease traditionally. And that's the same answer I give when I had this patient who had diabetes, and she said, "Doc, I don't want Pākehā medicines." I said, "Well, I'm sorry to hear that because you've got a Pākehā disease." We never had diabetes traditionally, so we've got no traditional rongoa for diabetes. We never had COVID traditionally, so we've got no traditional rongoa for COVID.
The Pfizer would appear to be the preferred vaccine. So is that the one that we're currently using at the moment, I guess, opposed to the other vaccines that I've seen, like is it Jansen and is it Novavax?
Yeah, so the Pfizer vaccine is what we have in New Zealand at the moment, and you're right, it's definitely the preferred vaccine. Worldwide, it's probably the best studied one.
When it says that it is provisionally approved, what does that mean exactly?
It's kind of like putting an offer in on a house and then sealing the deal, eh? So you say we have provisional approval for other vaccines that we haven't necessarily bought, but the Pfizer one is the one that we bought. It's just the way that we it's the timing and the way that we license medications. So if all of a sudden we didn't want Pfizer and a better one came along, it's kind of our get out of jail free card so that we can go and get a better one. Because what people have interpreted that is, it means it's not actually okay. And so this provisional means there's something wrong with it, but it's actually the way in which we get approval for all of our medicines.
How was the vaccine produced so quickly?
So that's a good question. So the technology to create the vaccine has been around for a lot longer. So when we first developed mRNA technology, it was 1994. When it was first designed for vaccines, it was 2004, and they actually used it in cancer vaccine technology. So I think it seems fast, but actually from a medical and technology point of view, a lot of the pieces were all ready to go.
Sometimes people are worried that the normal testing processes, stages of testing. That was my next question. That seemed to go fast too. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so the way that we look at medicines when we study them is there's two parts to it. There's the time that it takes, so the length of the trial, and the number of patients that you have in your trial. So the more patients you have in a trial, the better the evidence is, and it allows us to look over a shorter period of time. Lots of people got COVID and lots of people needed vaccination, so it was kind of like the biggest clinical study in the world. Whereas if you were studying something rare, it can take a long time to be able to prove a medication works or it's safe. So that's what allowed us to do it quickly from that point of view.
Also, I want to just say thanks for seeking out some answers, and we really want to reassure you that it has been tested on millions of people around the world. How many million doses has been given, Anthony?
Over 350 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine.
If I'm vaccinated, how come it can't prevent me from getting COVID?
It does a little bit. If you imagine the vaccine works inside your body, if you get COVID to stop you getting sick from it, it can't project that outside of your body to stop people coughing on you, it getting into your eyes, your nose and your mouth. It can only clear it from your system. And that's one of the problems. It's kind of not a force field. It's designed so that you can kill off COVID if you ever come into contact with it.
Okay, so how does an unvaccinated person affect a vaccinated person?
It's whether or not they abide by other health regulations as well, you know, making sure that they mask. So from a transmission point of view, but what we don't want happening is people to fall sick in your community, fill up your hospitals and all of the other effects on the community so that you can't get the health care that you need.
If I'm vaccinated and I contract the virus and I transmit it to somebody else, am I giving them a lesser version or a watered down version of the virus, or because I'm vaccinated?
What determines how sick they're going to get is whether or not they're vaccinated. So that's why we always want communities to be vaccinated together, because obviously that means that everyone's more likely to stay well.
I'm an ambulance officer, so I get asked all the time these questions. I'm like, geez, I need to know some answers because, I just say it. I'm not a rocket scientist, but, I hear them. Yeah. I hear those people that are worried about this vaccine, and their biggest issue is it hasn't been tested. Ooh. It hasn't been long enough. They're using us as the guinea pigs. That's their biggest worry. And if it was so good, why are we still getting COVID? Why are vaccinated people getting COVID? But you answered that. You answered that question for me.
And so I think that's the best answer you can give them is if you can change it from a disease that kills into a disease that has no symptoms, then it's no longer a disease. It's just a virus.
But I'd like to add that as a public health doctor, that the things we're doing in terms of wearing masks, so stopping the aerosol spread, you know, being 2 metres apart, or if we're in a room, making sure it's well ventilated, washing our hands and cleaning surfaces, those are all really good protection against any of the airborne viruses, especially COVID at the moment.
Guys, do you believe, hand on heart, that this vaccine is the answer to our woes? Is this going to make COVID go away?
I would like to start off by saying, hand on heart, I'm double vaccinated and a happy woman, because this may not make COVID go away, but it will protect me, the ones I love, my whānau and my hapori, when COVID comes to town. And it's we're at quite a dangerous part of the outbreak in Auckland at the moment. So yes, I'm encouraging everybody around me to get vaccinated. I'm very happy to be vaccinated.
There's all those things that they say about you can get vaccinated, but you can still get ill and die from COVID, and you can still pass it on to other people, including our mokopuna who cannot get vaccinated at this stage.
Again, I would say actually you're more protected by taking the vaccine than you would be if you're not vaccinated, even when you weigh up the potential of side effects.
If it is possible to eradicate COVID fully, what's the percentage of people who need to get vaccinated?
I'd love to be able to tell you we could eradicate it, and we missed the boat on that, and I really think realistically now eradication of this virus is not possible. If we look back, not with the vaccines we've got at the moment and not with the coverage we've got in the world right now, there's only ever been one virus that we've managed to eradicate through vaccination, and that was the smallpox. So it's really hard to achieve eradication. It doesn't mean we can't have a good life though, and it doesn't mean that the vaccines aren't working. But it's really important, I think, to recognise that now that eradication requires the whole world, not just New Zealand, the whole world to get rid of the virus. And unfortunately, the world's not a fair place, and there's plenty of people around the world who can't access any vaccine. Does that answer that question?
Yeah. So basically, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're saying is you'd need basically every single person on the planet to be vaccinated in order to fully eradicate it.
It's not the only way you can eradicate it. You have to get rid of everybody who's got the infection, and it's so widespread now that that's going to be really hard to ever do with the vaccines that we've currently got.
Are you vaccinated?
No, I'm not vaccinated yet. I still haven't decided whether or not. Well, at the moment, to be honest, I'm leaning more on the unvaccinated side, but yeah, I just wanted to kind of ask you guys some questions to get a bit more info on that.
Yeah, nice. Because I got some nephews over there, and I really want them vaccinated. Because I'm just saying, but I think Delta's going to get in. Delta gets over the fence or under the fence or through the gate, and probably Delta's going to break out at some point in Gold Coast. I'd really love you to be vaccinated, be protected if you can.
How come they're in such a hurry to get Māori and Pacific Islanders vaccinated all of a sudden?
I think it's a great question, and I think that we're actually behind the ball in getting vaccinated. Some people say, oh no, we shouldn't buy into a government trying to blah blah blah, we don't trust the government. But actually we can hold two truths at once. We can both have suspicions about a colonial government, but we can also understand that we live in the 21st century. We've got significant vulnerabilities in our health, and we need the best health improvement medications and treatments to get onto it.